Today on the Daily Scoop podcast from the Scoop News Group, the U.S. Army introduces a sweeping reform of its acquisition system. And now that the shutdown's over, questions swirl about the Pentagon's plans to issue missed paychecks. It's Friday, November 14th, 2025. Welcome to the Daily Scoop podcast, where you'll hear the latest news and trends facing government leaders. I'm the host of the Daily Scoop podcast, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for joining me. And now let's dive into the day's top headlines. The U.S. Army is initiating massive organizational reforms for how it buys new weapons and capabilities in an effort to drastically shorten procurement timelines and promote innovation, according to top service officials. Announced Friday, the Army's acquisition portfolio overhaul will consolidate the service's program executive offices, or PEOs, responsible for buying new weapons into 6 new offices called Portfolio Acquisition Executives, or PAEs. The plan also creates a new office dedicated to rapidly injecting and scaling emerging technology into Army formations. The transformation comes after Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth announced his intent to revamp acquisition processes across the entire Pentagon on November 7th, as well as an April directive from Hegseth that called on the Army to consolidate many aspects of the service, including its procurement organizations. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll told reporters this week ahead of the announcement that the new structure aims to mimic best practices from private industry, creating a new system that accepts risk and streamlines capability delivery. Driscoll said, quote, "What we're doing is taking what private industry does when you have a profit and loss and a margin you have to achieve. It drives efficiency in your system in a way that government just has not had to do historically," unquote. The service began iteratively implementing the new PAEs in October and expects that organizations will reach initial operating capability in January of 2026. Rather than focus on individual programs, PAEs will own their own capability areas and oversee various related portfolios. Reducing the time between requirement validation and capability delivery will be a key measure of success for the PAEs, Army Chief of Staff General Randy George said. At the same time, having all of the key acquisition and sustainment leads under one organization will help the service make better decisions on specific capability trade-offs for its programs, he added. Also part of the reorganization is the creation of the Pathway for Innovation and Technology, or PIT office, which will focus on accelerating emerging technology development and integration into the field. Reporting directly to the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, the PIT will embed into other organizations across the Army to understand what soldiers immediately need and integrate it across the service. And now moving on to other news, the Defense Department's civilian employees whose pay was impacted by the record-setting government shutdown and lapse in appropriations that ended earlier this week are expecting to receive their missed paychecks retroactively. However, questions are swirling about the Pentagon's plans as it reopened on Thursday, including the timeline for that out-of-cycle back pay process, whether it will arrive in the form of lump sum payments, and much more. According to a new policy memo from the White House's Office of Personnel Management issued Wednesday after President Donald Trump signed legislation to fund the government, quote, "Federal employees who did not receive pay because of the lapse in appropriations that began on October 1st must receive retroactive pay at the employee's standard rate of pay for the lapse period as soon as possible after the lapse ends, pursuant to the U.S. Code." That guidance applies explicitly to the department's personnel affected by the lapse who are either furloughed or performed accepted work activities. Service members and some DoD civilians designated essential reported to work during the shutdown, but only military officials were paid. More than 1 million federal employees reportedly missed a partial and 2 full paychecks during the shutdown, which caused serious financial strain for public servants across the nation. Several reports surfaced this week regarding when the Pentagon might begin processing paychecks and how soon they could start to arrive. The DoD did not appear to publicly release final comprehensive guidance with details on its workforce repayment schedule and plans. For more news at the intersection of the federal government and technology, make sure to visit fedscoop.com. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Daily Scoop podcast, available on all podcast platforms. If you've already rated the podcast on your platform of choice, thanks so much. High ratings and good reviews of the show help more people to find it. The Daily Scoop podcast is a production of the Scoop News Group in Washington, D.C. Adam Butler and Carlin Fisher help put the show together, and the entire Scoop News Group team contributes. We'll be back next week with more top headlines. Until then, I'm your host, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for listening.